What's up, humans? And welcome to a new Psicoactivo episode. It is Lue Elizondo's book premiere of Imminent. And I'm like 4 hours in the book right now. I ordered my Audible copy, but I started reading it this morning. And one of the things that I found very, very interesting was a little piece where he says that his mother inherited Cherokee blood from her family in Kentucky. Then he asks, was it by design that I was in this job in the first place? Was it even my choice? Or was it simply fate? He's asking that because in another part of the book, he says it turned out that almost all of the people in Will's studies, military and intelligence officials with remote viewing capabilities and or UAP encounters and biological effects, had a Native American DNA, specifically Cherokee blood. Even stranger, key players on Senate committees, people who were very active in this topic, turned out to have Cherokee blood as well. Was all of this a bizarre coincidence? And I come here to tell you that it is not a bizarre coincidence. And it is not just Cherokee people. As you guys know, I've been studying Dr. Jacobo Grinberg's case for 3 years now. And I've been reading up on the books he wrote about shamans. And in one of those books, he talks about the caudate nucleus, which is the same part of the brain that Dr. Garry Nolan claims to have discovered that there's some tissue in there. I do believe that Dr. Garry Nolan discovered the tissue physically for the first time in history, but he is not the first one who has been studying this part of the brain, because Greenberg has been before him, and I am not aware of any other scientists who did this at the time. But what Dr. Greenberg was trying to do was to find a correlation between the caudate putamen and these abilities that shamans had for generations. And now that Lue is talking about the DNA being involved in this, I think that there's something to this that we need to talk about. So the abilities that Dr. Jacobo Grinberg spoke about in his book that shamans used to have to do with environment manipulation, telepathy, healing, and transfiguration of some kind, because what Pachita did when she operated on the bodies was that she took out the organ and materialized another from thin air. That is what Dr. Greenberg says on his book that he saw. I am not saying that this is real. I am not saying that I believe this is the case, but I do find it very interesting that what Dr. Greenberg had been doing for a long time, for decades, it's something that Lue Elizondo is mentioning directly in his book right now, which is the apparent connection between DNA from Native Americans or Native cultures from either the country or the rest of the continent, and these skills, this predisposition to have these abilities more evolved or more evident than the rest. I am going to play a clip of Dr. Nolan talking about the caudate putamen so you guys have some kind of context to what I'm talking about. Here's one clip.
Intuition, right? Intelligence, there's two kinds of intelligence that you can easily talk about. There's I can give you a problem and you can work out the solution step by step. And then I can give you a problem with insufficient data, but you jump to the conclusion because you can see, even without being able to prove, what the answer should be, even though you can't take all the steps to get there. And that's what we often call intuition or trusting your gut. And this whole idea of intuition and some kind of seeing things at a distance, remote viewing, is a form of intuiting things with sparse data or coming to a conclusion with sparse data. And so then when we looked in the literature, we found one paper from a Japanese group looking at an MRI, functional MRI, of people who were making choices playing chess, a form of Japanese chess.
Is
And
Go?
It wasn't Go. I forget the name of it, but it's like chess, but it doesn't have as many pieces. And what they would do is they were following the brain scan of people who were making choices. And the simple first steps, nothing really lit up. But when somebody made an unexpected but brilliant move, this area of the brain lit up in the Caudate Putamen. And even in that paper, they called it intuition. There was a paper from, actually, believe it or not, as far back as 1990, a Harvard psychiatrist who actually is now at UCLA. And I tried to contact him, but he didn't answer. But he speculated, even as far back as then, that the basal ganglia caudate putamen was actually involved in intuition and was a data processing center that took information from as many contexts as it had wiring to gather and integrated data. And now, even though it wasn't at the time, many people were kind of coming to the same conclusion that this is really, this area of the brain is an action and goal planning area, which abstracts all information from memory, desires, goals, emotions, what it sees in the world, to make internal subconscious plans for just even body movement, but also now for all the other abstract ideas that humans come up with. And so it's one of the nicknames for it is the brain within the brain. And because it has access to basically all visual and sensory systems, because it needs it to make choices to move in the world, just to walk, it makes the perfect place to integrate any kind of, let's say, additional ability that somebody might want to postulate, because you would have to integrate it through that. The information would have to be, somehow imposed on the system and then understood by this area of the brain to be relevant at all. So, if you had to place a psi center anywhere, that would be the place to look.
So yeah, he's talking about this. He has still he let know a very limited and narrow explanation of what this caudate putamen may do or may not do. He believes that it's somehow connected to human intuition. What Dr. Greenberg said was that the people who had this area of the brain more activated through the brain scans that he did back in the day were these shamans who had multiple different skills. It wasn't just intuition. It was a connection with the environment, and they had like a higher level of empathy towards people that they spoke to constantly. And yes, it has to do with intuition. It has to do with empathy. It has to do with a better understanding of nature in general. I don't like it that there's a connection between the DNA from native people here and those abilities. I would like to think that everybody's capable of that. And if not, it's really alarming to me that so many Native Americans have been pursued, even murdered throughout history, because if they did it knowingly of this DNA connection, I don't see how they would know. That's really alarming and terrifying to me, because I have Native American blood in me, and I don't want to be persecuted. I don't even pay attention to the many signs that I see along the way that could point me towards maybe finding out that I have some level of weird abilities. I don't want to be connected to that in any way, because the journalistic work that I'm doing would be interrupted if I was to pay attention to that fully, because I feel like this is such an important aspect of all of this story that I can't be in one place and the other one at the same time. I had to choose between one and the other, and I choose to do the journalism of it so more people are aware of what's happening. So I'm gonna keep that shut down at least until I finish my investigation, and then I am gonna try to explore it a little bit more, because I've done meditation quite a bit, and I have found some very interesting aspects of this practice, which is millennia old. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on what you think about Dr. Greenberg's experiments. I'm going to play one clip of one of his experiments right here.
Well, it has been very interesting to listen to everyone, and I agree with Dominique The important thing is synergy. And I would like to tell you about an experiment we did in Mexico that is closely related to some of the things that have been discussed. For several years we have been recording the activity of the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And what we did was a program with a computer where the computer received the information from both hemispheres, compared it with each other, and depending on the result of the comparison, gave a series of signals to the subjects. For example, if the waveforms of the two hemispheres were very similar, the computer gave a very low tone, a low sound. If the shapes began to be different, the electroencephalographic shapes, it gave a high-pitched sound in such a way that the subject could know through a sound feedback system the state of his interhemispheric unification, and also learn to modify the interhemispheric relations. It could, for example, decide to increase the interhemispheric correlation by moving towards the low sounds, or decide to increase the difference, the lateralization, by moving towards the high sounds. We repeated this on more than 30 subjects for 3 or 4 years, because what we wanted to know is what was the experience of unification, that is, what was happening with the psychology of the subject when his two hemispheres began to work in a correlative way. And what the subjects reported in all cases is that as the interhemispheric correlation increased and the two hemispheres came to work coherently, their sensation was that of reaching or touching an ego center, a unity, an internal state of stillness, of peace, of coordination. That is, there was an isomorphism between their subjective experience and the interhemispheric correlation. In contrast, the less interhemispheric correlation there was, the less subjects reported a sense of dispersion. They felt bad. They felt they were not in unity. Very interesting. The most trained subjects reported that when they were able to control at will the interhemispheric correlation, that is, to increase or decrease it at will, they began to feel as if they were in an existence, in a state, in an extracerebral location. That is, I don't mean that they stepped out of their body and saw their body, but that they felt that their experience was located in a place that was no longer right-left, but included both. In one experiment, what we did was to interact people who normally remain in a state of high interhemispheric correlation. All of us have oscillations in our interhemispheric interaction. There is, unless we are veteran meditators, no state of continuity in the interhemispheric correlation. We oscillate. Sometimes there is more correlation, sometimes there is less correlation. We have patterns of interhemispheric correlation that are surely associated with these states of identity or non-identity, of unification or non-unification. So what we did was to interact subjects that were at different levels of correlation, and what we observed, similar to the transferred potential experiment, is that the subject that had the highest interhemispheric correlation always attracted the other subject to its level. This is pre-verbal interaction, right? Without verbalization, simply by the sensation of mutual presence. The subject with a low correlation began to increase it, and the one with a high correlation slightly decreased its correlation until they reached an equilibrium. And I think this is very interesting to think about in terms of the relationships between us humans, how we feel about each other, and to what extent someone's unified state changes the environment.
I have played this clip before about the interhemispherical correlation imbalance. I think this is connected to these studies that he was doing with the shamans. I do believe that in his writing, he says that he found far more interhemispherical balance and correlation between the shaman people and people who were native from the lands compared to people who are their DNA has been combined a lot more, or people who are from the city, or who are from Europe or from other places. Because please understand, guys, Dr. Greenberg did a lot of scientific work and many experiments at UNAM laboratories that at the time were state-of-the-art technology. They had everything over there. So he had a lot of toys to play with. Yeah, I don't know if his disappearance is linked in any way to this specific part of his investigation, but I do already have a set of questions directed at specific people within many of these programs. This includes Stargate and other programs that I am going to try and ask directly to them. And I want to make it clear, I am not after anyone. I just want to find out why Dr. Greenberg's work has been suppressed for so long, and why a lot of the work that he did is now being regurgitated by a lot of many different scientists and people, and not acknowledging him at all. I find that really strange. I don't know if you guys find it strange too, but I do. So I want to look into that a little bit more. And kudos to Dr. Garry Nolan for finding that place and that specific tissue inside of the brain of these people who went through these experiences. But I think he needs to know that there was another scientist before him who was investigating this Caudate Putamen and all the capabilities that the people he was looking into had, mainly shamans. I would love to hear what he has to say about that. I know for a fact that he has a lot of stuff to do. He probably never had time to read on Dr. Greenberg's books. They're mostly in Spanish, so he doesn't really have a reason to. But I'm more than happy to show him everything that I've done so far on this investigation, and it hopefully can help his investigation so they can bring Dr. Greenberg's work into the fold and maybe integrate it into what they're looking at, as long as it's not classified, right? Because we know that historically these psi abilities have been considered or acknowledged as not real for decades, because a lot of these psi abilities have been weaponized. I hope this is not the case. I hope that these findings Dr. Garry Nolan made are always in for the betterment of humanity and not for getting contracts or helped any of these three-letter agencies. I really hope that. I do think Dr. Garry Nolan is a good person, so I am always look for the good in people. So I do think that his intentions are true. I am very, very eager to see what he thinks about this work from Dr. Greenberg, because it's important. And these correlations are very hard to ignore. So I leave the ball in his court, so to speak. So yeah, this is what I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you guys think about this video and this correlation, this Caudate Putamen investigation that Dr. Greenberg did for many years, and this discovery of the Caudate Putamen that Dr. Garry Nolan found recently, relatively recently. And yeah, we have to right some of these wrongs. I think that Dr. Greenberg needs to be acknowledged, at least acknowledged, because he did a lot of different discoveries, not just that. And I don't like it that people don't seem to know who he is. I find that really alarming. So the more people that know who he is, the faster I think we're going to get to many of these answers, because I do think that many of the experiments he ran were directly linked to a lot of this stuff in ufology, especially when it's linked to consciousness and mind powers and all this stuff, which sounds like an X-Men movie, but it's not. There's something to that. They have spent millions over decades investigating this stuff. If there was nothing to it, they wouldn't have spent so much money. So it's just that. So if you like the content you see, please hit that subscribe button, the like button. Please share, comment. I love the comments you guys bring. I'm sure that this conversation is going to go to many places. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this, because I did find very interesting that Lue Elizondo mentioned this, and it just clicked to me, because I've been reading up on Dr. Greenberg's work on shamans, and he does mention it quite a bit. So let's try to keep digging on this and see what the correlations bring up. And hopefully Dr. Nolan sees this so we can talk about it. If not, that's okay. I can continue my investigation on my own. I already have contact with many scientists who are also interested in this. And if Dr. Nolan doesn't want to be a part of it, then that's okay. I don't mind. I still have the utmost respect for him. I love what he's doing on the topic and all the contributions he's had over the years. So no harm, no foul. I don't mind. But yeah, If you want to help the channel in any other way, I'm going to leave a few links in the description for either donations, or you can get yourself something. Whatever you like, any kind of help will be greatly appreciated. And until tomorrow with a new video, we'll see you guys until next time. Bye-bye.